All right, guys, thanks for joining another episode of Girl, Is That Legal? With your host, attorney Simone Redwine. I apologize for that delay there, but we're going to get into it. So, I finally have the Chris Brown lawsuit, and it's kind of weird. So, we're going to go through it. There are two actually. Ooh, I just spit all over the room. There are two actually. There's one that was filed by a group of four guys who were injured allegedly by Chris Brown and his entourage. And then there's a second complaint that's filed by the security guard. They sound a lot alike. They are very similar because they are filed by the same law firm. But as I get into it, I'm going to give you guys a chance to come on in here. I be the shit. Good to see you. Happy Friday Eve. I know that's right. Emerge. Same to you. Yes. Can I change the timer? I'm going to work on that. Yeah. I want like a 2-minute countdown or something like that. I know someone has said it almost made him dizzy. So my apologies there. So we've got those. But the first thing I'm going to say about this, I'm just going to give you my initial thoughts before I haven't even read the substance of it. But this whole incident transpired in Fort Worth, Texas. That's basically like a suburb of Dallas, right? It's part of the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth. However, this lawsuit was filed in Houston, Texas, Harris County. That was really suspect to me. So I'm not going to make any assumptions just yet, but I want you to keep that in the back of your mind because we're going to talk about venue. And my guess is going to be one of the first motions that we see or documents that we see on behalf of the defendants are going to be to try and transfer this case from Houston to Fort Worth, where it actually happened. There's a few reasons for that, but primarily counties that are seen as Democratic are seen as ones that are more lenient towards victims, whereas counties that are Republican, which Tarrant County is, Tarrant County and Fort Worth, Fort Worth is in Tarrant County. Those that lean Republican are not at all. The Republicans have the theory of, you should get it by the bootstraps. They are hesitant to believe victims, especially victims that do not look like themselves. And here, although I have, like I said, I haven't read it yet, but chances are if it's a Chris Brown concert, those victims don't necessarily look like the Hicks out in Tarrant County. And so let's get into it. We're going to first read the complaint of the four guys. And I'll say with that complaint, it's the four alleged victims. They're suing all at once. Get this a little bit bigger. And it's only 15 pages, so this shouldn't take super long. But basically, we're going to start with the summary of the case. And y'all, forgive me, I'm blind as a bat, and I don't have my big screen. All right, but here we go. The gist of it is the plaintiffs are Larry Parker, Joseph Williams, Charles Rush, and DeMarcus Powell. Now, they are suing Chris Brown, Live Nation Marketing. They listed John Doe. John Doe represents basically it says John Doe, aka Cinco CJ. I don't know who that is. But John Doe can also be used for a placeholder when you believe that there are more people at fault. You just haven't figured out their names yet. All right. In addition, there is Omalulu, Armari, Akinlulu, whatever, Hood Boss, as well as Yella Beezy. Yella Beezy is from Dallas, as I am. All right, so the summary of the case. Now, mind you, the attorneys that filed this case are the same attorneys that filed the various different petitions against Deshaun Watson, the Houston Texans former quarterback. Those allegations were that he went to massage parlors and asked the masseuse for happy endings. Now, none of those allegations were that when they said no, he did anything bad. He didn't assault them. He didn't do anything like that. But they literally filed the lawsuit because he asked people to touch his weeder. That's a whole nother deal. And now we're going to go into the facts as well as what is the proper city that this should have been brought in. It says the case arises from a violent assault perpetrated by a troubled recording artist with a checkered past. Without justifiable provocation, performer Chris Brown, and his paid entourage, In other words, he ain't got no free friends. He got to pay somebody to be his friend. Brutally and severely beat plaintiffs Larry Parker. Larry Parker, now that sounds like a black man. Larry Parker, Joseph Lewis, he probably black too. Charles Bush. Charles sounds black, but Bush, we never know. Charles Bush and DeMarcus Powell. DeMarcus is definitely black. Okay. Chris Brown has a long history of violence. The plaintiffs herein are the latest in a long line of individuals who have suffered at Brown's hands. This incident, which is the subject of this case, occurred July 20th. Dang, it has not even been a full week. They're on it. July 20th, following Brown's performance at the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth. Let's see. I want to make sure you can still hear me. Okay, good. At the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth. It says the concert was presented and marketed by Live Nation defendants. The violence included Brown and his entourage surrounding the plaintiffs, throwing chairs at them, and repeatedly kicking, stomping, and beating them. The unprovoked violence included multiple strikes to plaintiffs' heads and chests, and ultimately involved stomping them while they were down. The brutal, violent assault participated in and directed by Brown severely injured all plaintiffs. Chris Brown's egregious conduct must be stopped. Through this action, plaintiffs seek to hold responsible Brown's presenters and promoters, as well as his paid entourage, for this outrageous and violent behavior. This case seeks both compensatory and punitive damages in excess of $50 million. Now they're going to go into parties. It just dawned on me. See, remember I talked about the venue and that generally, if you represent victims, you want a more democratic city, like Harris County versus Fort Worth. Also important, Tony Busby is the lawyer who filed this for the plaintiffs. He's so powerful in Houston that he was actually running for mayor. That's how powerful he is. So that's another reason why they likely wanted Houston. And it just dawned on me, Live Nation, who they have included as a defendant, who's the promoter of this tour, Live Nation is headquartered in Houston. So that's likely how they decided and filed in Houston. Also, Live Nation is insured. So by including Live Nation, he's able to argue negligent security. As I said, I haven't read this petition, but I'm going to anticipate that'll be one of the claims, because once you say negligent security, you have access to $1 million insurance policy. In fact, remember, that is how Cassie got multiple millions from the hotel that hid that footage of her and also was completely aware of Diddy whooping that tail. All right, here we go. The parties. Plaintiff A, B, like each of the plaintiffs is from Denton County. Denton County is closer to Fort Worth. All right, Chris Brown is a California resident. Live Nation. There we go. Like I said, principal place of business in Houston. Blah, blah, blah. It's got their address. Same with Live Nation Marketing. We don't know about the John Does. One of the defendants, is also a Houston resident. And the defendant, DeAndre Conway, is a Hutchins. Damn, people still live in Hutchins. Woo, Hutchins is rural. We'll say Hutchins is rural. Oh, wait a minute. He probably has a whole bunch of land in Hutchins. Okay, that's why he wants to live in Hutchins. Plus, out there in the country, ain't nobody going to bother him. That's, I believe that's Yella Beezy's name. All right, so those are the parties that are involved. And now that explains why Houston. Here we go. All right. Also, the claim for relief. The damages here are within the limits of the court, blah, 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 jurisdiction and venue. Because usually you have to file where it occurred. And that would have been Fort Worth. However, if the defendants live somewhere, oftentimes you can also file there because it makes it more convenient for the defendants. The gist of it is you can't pick a venue that makes it an obstacle for any defendant to be able to defend themselves. So you can make it easier for them, but you cannot make it harder. All right, jurisdiction and venue. This court has subject matter jurisdiction because it involves an amount and of the of the amount. The court has personal jurisdiction over defendants because they do business in Texas, and the cause of action arose in Texas. Specifically, defendant is subject to personal jurisdiction because the incident in question arises and relates to a concert that they marketed and sold tickets for in Texas. But here's what I care about: venue. There we go. Venue is proper in Harris County under the code because it is the county in which one or more of the defendants resided at the time of the accrual of the cause of action. Boom. So they got a defendant and they got Live Nation, an individual defendant. All right. Alter ego, background and facts. Plaintiffs reside in Denton County. Larry, victim, and I think one of the plaintiffs, y'all, is supposed to still be in the hospital. It says Larry Parker is a victim of a brutal assault by Brown and his entourage and suffered head injuries. He was hospitalized and has received continuing medical treatment and will need to undergo extensive medical treatment for the damage he suffered in the attack, including head injuries. Plaintiff Bush, Lewis, and Powell were all beat and suffered bodily injuries, including neck, shoulder, and back injuries. All plaintiffs are receiving medical treatment and will need further treatment in the future. So it's saying Parker was hospitalized. Okay. For the damages suffered. Now, one thing that's interesting is I don't know that I've ever seen a civil complaint filed so soon. I'm very curious as to why they felt the need to rush this suit. I think it's just because there were such big pockets. There's no need to wait. And by that, I mean, generally, I'm an injury attorney. I do serious injuries such as these 18-wheelers, medical devices, all kinds of things. And generally, your first step is you send a demand letter to the opposing side asking for a defined amount of money. You may ask for the insurance policy limits or something. I always do that first because of the fact that my contract and all standard contracts say you get 1% if you settle it without having to file your lawsuit, but then that percentage goes up if you do file a lawsuit. In other words, I feel like it's unfair to the client to not at least attempt to settle it out of court. Here, I don't see how they could have made any fair attempt to settle it out of court because of how quick it was. But also, when you're going against big wigs like Live Nation, they ain't going to settle out of court this quickly or anytime soon. So I can understand that decision. All right, page 5. And there's only 12 pages, so this ain't going to take forever. Defendant Chris Brown lives in California. Oops. He has a checkered past. Brown has several times been reported to be involved in incidents of violence and assault, beating men and women alike. Brown specifically pled guilty to felony assault, but evaded prison for beating his girlfriend, former performer Rihanna. In that incident, Brown pulverized Rihanna's face, and put her in the hospital. Last year, Brown reportedly stomped and dealt crushing blows to the head of a concert goer. In another incident, Brown reportedly threw a tequila bottle directly at a patron, severely and permanently injuring him. Other bad conduct and violent conduct reportedly involving Brown has occurred across the globe. Nonetheless, Live Nation shamelessly profits and promotes Brown's 11/11 tour and brought Brown to Texas for financial gain. Live Nation has failed to ensure that the participants of the concert who may be around Brown and his associates were safe. Here's what they're trying to do, y'all. They're trying to stop Chris Brown's money completely. A lot of people don't realize that really what governs business is not just money, but it's the ability to make money with minimal risk. Effectively, Chris Brown, every tour Chris Brown does, every tour Live Nation does, must be insured. It's insurance that goes in place in case of slip and fall. Remember the Travis Scott concert where there was all those people injured? Not a dime of that came out of Travis Scott's pocket because there was insurance in place, and every venue in America demands that each concert is insured. Okay, so if you mess with Chris Brown's ability to get insurance for each performance, for each concert, he can't tour. This is big. This is so big, y'all. Here we go. So basically, if they had just sued Chris Brown, it wouldn't necessarily impact his insurance ability. But every year, just like every year when you want to renew your homeowners or your auto insurance, they look at the claims. Well, it's the same thing with corporate insurance. So Live Nation's insurance company is going to look at the claims. This is one claim that the insurance company is going to have to be tapped, and they're going to have to pay to defend against this lawsuit. And so they're going to say, well, wait a minute. We don't want to insure you if you're going to keep insuring, or if you're going to keep sponsoring Chris Brown concerts. They can absolutely say that, in which case Chris Brown is either going to have to stop touring, or he's going to have to find a different insurance company that can would make the rates so high he might not be able to afford it, or ticket prices will have to substantially be increased. Here you go. Sorry, guys. My helpers are here. Somebody, all right, let me look at the comments real quick while we take this break. Georgette says, exactly, because if you admitted to having an issue prior with Chris Brown, what would be your reason for going backstage? So, yes, so let's speak to that. So, I've seen various commentary online that has been speaking about the fact that Chris Brown previously had an issue with at least one of these guys that was part of the plaintiffs, and that is part of what started this issue. So let's see from the plaintiff's version what they talk about, and then let's make it make sense. Because at the end of the day, I always say when you're reading about a lawsuit and it doesn't make sense from the forefront, it's either because somebody's lying or we don't have all the facts. So let's see here. All right. So we got, y'all, there's all kind of noise going on in the background because, like I said, my housekeepers are cleaning. So we got toilets flushing, we got water running. We just gonna do our best because I have to work on a motion with the court shortly. All right. So then we've got, let's see. It says at the bottom part, Chris Brown's entourage of assailants includes known felons, defendant Cinco Siege, another musician and member of the Bloods gang, has spent at least 8 years in prison and is a known companion of Brown. Cinco participated in the violence at the plaintiff's instruction, I guess is what it's probably going to say. The violence directed at the plaintiffs. Okay, correction. These are photos of these people. All right. Defendant Maurice Conway is a former Crip gang member who's been arrested on multiple occasions for possession of firearms, assault, and possession carrying a pow-pow. Defendant Hood Boss is also known as, can't even pronounce that name, is the known Brown companion. Brown specifically instructed him to hurt and injure plaintiffs and threw a chair directly at him. Brown, here we go. Brutal attack by Brown and his entourage at the Live Nation Chris Brown event. On July 20th, plaintiffs attended a Live Nation marketed and produced concert wherein Brown was featured. The concert occurred at the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas. After the show concluded, plaintiffs, along with approximately 40 women, were invited backstage to Brown's VIP area, an event promoted and marketed by Live Nation defendants. Hold on. I'm very curious. They were invited back. We don't finish this section because I'm curious who they're going to say invited them. Upon entry to the VIP area, Brown instructed all of the women to relinquish their phones and place them on a table. Subsequently, defendants Brown and his entourage left, closed the door, and stationed a security guard in front of it. After approximately 30 minutes of waiting, Brown entered the VIP area. At this time, having grown tired of waiting, plaintiffs were ready to leave and began to attempt to exit the lounge area. Immediately prior to leaving, Plaintiff Bush approached Brown to shake his hand and congratulate him on a good show. Bush stated, "Good show. It's been a while, but I'm glad to see you're doing well. It's been a long time since I've seen you." Brown shook Bush's hand and replies, "Hey, yeah, it has been, and I appreciated it. And I appreciate it." As plaintiffs then started to exit, a member of Brown's entourage remarked loudly to Brown, "Man, don't you remember you two were beefing?" Brown then took a liquor cup and said, "Oh, yeah, we were. What up? I don't forget ish." Without further discussion, Okay, without further discussion of any response by Bush, Brown then instructed his entourage to F plaintiff. Ladies, I'm trying to record, so let's limit the talking. Sandra, can you ask him to not talk? I'm recording. Thank you. Sorry. We have language barrier. Okay. Hearing this, Bush attempted to quickly leave with his companions he had brought to the show. At this point, Brown and approximately 7 to 10 members of his entourage followed Plaintiff Bush into the hallway and began to assault Bush and his companions. One of Brown's entourage, known by the alias Cinco, ran to the left side of the crowd and punched Bush in the chest. Simultaneously, another one of the entourage, it says with the alias Hood Boss, picked up a chair and threw it at Bush's head. Defendant Brown then turned his attention to Plaintiff Parker, instructing Yella Beezy and others to F Plaintiff Parker up. Severely outnumbered, Parker fled into the staircase, attempting to exit at the bottom of the stairs. Upon arrival, Parker discovered that the door was locked. Upon instruction by Brown, Parker was then punched in the face and chest, kicked in the head for over 10 minutes, and stomped on by Defendant Brown and his associates. Brown encouraged his companions to join in the assault simultaneously. Brown and his entourage then continued to beat Plaintiff Parker close-fisted for almost minutes. I bet it was supposed to say 10 minutes or something. I don't know. For almost minutes, repeatedly stomping on his head, kicking his face and ribs, and causing severe bodily injury. The entourage also punched DeMarcus in the shoulder and Lewis in the shoulder and chest. All plaintiffs are injured, some severe. All are undergoing medical treatment. Now, hold on. I want to confirm. Let's confirm which of the plaintiffs was the one that had the prior beef. Brown shook Bush's hand. Okay. Charles Bush is the one that had the prior beef. All right. So now we're going to go to the causes of action, and that won't take too long. We'll break this down, but I need to see your comments in here, because the question is, if you knew you had previously had a beef with, why are you going into anybody's VIP, especially if it's unclear whether there's been any formal squashing of the beef? So, which makes me think that the beef it's been a while, but not that it was formally squashed, because if so, Brown would have remembered that, I would assume. Purple Rain, it says the man is suing because he lost the fight. Another thing is, I'd be curious to know, was this one of the VIPs similar to a meet and greet? Because like a meet and greet is $1,000 a ticket. I want to know, did these men pay to be there? Whether it's sliding security some money to get there or anything else. Because if you paid to be in the presence of your former op, that's strange. That's questionable. Because it just doesn't make sense. But I also would like to know more about, for example, are these plaintiffs also in the music industry? Is that how they got back there? Maybe they're Houston-based artists. Well, no, I think it said they're from the Dallas area, Denton area. But I'd be very curious. We all want to know, what was the origination of that beef? Likely it was over a woman, because Chris Brown is always beefing over women. But I got some questions there. He said CB is a Taurus and he got them hand. Yep. Brown Mama says, if I had an issue with someone, I'm not going to any show, because show tickets ain't free. Or if they did get free tickets, how'd you get your free tickets? Who gave them to you? Because why are you paying money to see your op? That's odd. Unless the reason you're doing so is because you have a continued beef. Let me give you an example. So my daddy was real wild back in the day. And my auntie, she's real bad at picking men, worse than me. And she was dating this man that used to knock her across her head, just shake her around, beat her real bad. One day he beat her real bad, and she called my dad, was like, Rocky, come get me. I want to leave. And my dad was like, are you sure? Are you sure? Because what I'm about to do to him, y'all ain't never going to be able to get back together. She was like, yeah, Rocky, I'm sure. So he's like, I'm going to drive up there to come get you, because she lived hours away. So, and my dad was like, pack up all your stuff. My dad drove to town, didn't go to her house. Oh, no. He went to the jail where the guy was for beating up auntie. He went to the jail, bailed the man out, drove him into the woods, and beat him bad and bloody. Okay. Beat him real, real bad. I think he took his clothes too. So he was naked in the wilderness, no clothes. And he said, don't you ever touch my sister again. Now, this was great. It was in the 70s, back when they didn't care anything about black on black crime. So he totally got away with it. Also, the statute of limitations is passed. But most importantly, that was an incident where my dad literally had so much beef and so much animosity with this person. He was willing to put up the man's bond. He bailed the man out, put up cash to whoop his tail. I'm saying that to say that's a lot of beef. That's a lot of beef. Anyway, here we go. So let's go. I'm going to go over the causes of action real simply. This is the boring part, so I could just kind of explain it in lawyer terms, but for normal people, non-lawyers. Assault and battery. Now, mind you, remember, guys, this is a civil case. At this point, there is no risk of criminal charges. There is always a risk of criminal charges, but none are on the table. So these claims are all are all claims where they just have to pay money. So the first one is assault and battery. The next one is negligence and gross negligence on the defendants. Here, it says, based on information and belief, defendants breached the duty of reasonable care by failing to maintain the concert premises in a reasonably safe condition. Remember, I said like negligent security. In a reasonably safe condition, including but not limited to failing to properly surveil people coming and going, failing to monitor the premises with closed circuit TVs, failing to timely respond or otherwise act upon patrons' need for immediate medical attention, failing to notice or take precautions against assault, failing to adequately staff employees and security to maintain control of persons, and failing to train and supervise employees on the reporting and discovery of injured individuals and or persons, and failing to adequately provide safe entrance in plans in emergency situations, as well as failing to employ adequate safety measures and failing to intervene when it became dangerous and life-threatening for its attendees. Defendants are further liable for the negligence of their employees pursuant to the doctrine of respondeat superior. That's basically where you sue the company because they're responsible for their workers. You also do that because the workers ain't got no money. All right, so going down to the next claim, intentional infliction of emotional distress. That one's a bit of a stretch. All right, with malicious and evil intent, Defendant Brown and his entourage, now that's believable, intentionally threatened, beat, and hospitalized plaintiffs, intending to harm attendees at the concert, including all the plaintiffs. Brown and his entourage's intentional act instructing his own security to injure and hurt beat plaintiffs, including at least one who was deceased. Resulted in the infliction. That don't make sense. Hold on. Brown and his entourage's intentional act instructing his own security to injure and beat up the plaintiffs, including at least one who was deceased, resulted in the infliction of serious physical injuries and emotional distress to plaintiffs. I hadn't heard anything about anybody passing away. We would all know that. That doesn't seem accurate at all. Further, the other defendants are similarly liable for their actions. So here we go. The foregoing conduct is beyond outrageous and beyond acting with conscious disregard of the profitability that plaintiffs and other concert the probability that plaintiffs and other concert attendees would be injured, knowing that the foregoing persons were present when he maliciously and with evil intent continued to beat up plaintiffs. Defendants' actions were extreme and exceeded all bounds of behavior of civilized community. Hit that like button, y'all. We've got 40 something in the chat and we've got not enough likes. All right, next is we've got the damages. Direct and proximate cause. The plaintiffs suffered damages in the past. They will in the present because there's going to be, more medical treatment and care. Blah, blah, blah. And then they want exemplary. Exemplary is basically where you want punitive damage. You want exemplary damages are for intentional acts. I'll read it. They seek to recover exemplary against defendants based on their gross negligence in causing the incident and resulting injuries, and damages that are made the basis of this lawsuit. Because the acts of the individual defendants are also criminal acts, punitive damages sought are not subject to capping. That's absolutely true. In other words, if any criminal charges are filed, like usually in Texas, you're capped to, I think it's like 2 times or 2.5 times your actual damages. So your actual medical bills and things. However, if it's found that criminal charges are also going to be filed, um, and that these are also criminal acts, there's no cap. In other words, they could give him $10 million, even though the medical bills are actually only 25,000, something like that. So they're asking, oh, and they're also asking for a restraining order. I'll explain that part too, real quickly. The restraining order sounds real sexy. It's not that big of a deal. The restraining order is simply them asking that the records be preserved because they don't want tapes to get deleted or any of the evidence to be destroyed in an attempt to, you know, reduce their liability. Now, that includes any text messages between the defendants against each other. Like any of the guys, if they're like, yo, man, I did this or I did that, or put anything on Snapchat, all of that, they're saying they want all of that to be preserved. All right, so here we go. Someone asked, why did security let them into VIP if they didn't pay? So that's the other lawsuit that's here. I'm going to put that briefly on the stage. Now, we've got the same facts, but here we've got, this is the lawsuit from the security guard. This is Frederick Overpeak. Here we go. Let me pull this down. And with the security guard's lawsuit here, we'll read the summary of the case and then we're going to go, let me see, hold on. Here we are. I'm going to read the facts here because the claims of what they're suing for are the same for both. But what we really care about is what happened. Here's a summary of the facts from the perspective of the security guard. This case arises from a violent assault perpetrated by a troubled recording artist with a checkered and violent past. The plaintiff is a 58-year-old father and husband. As a second job, the plaintiff supervised several individuals in his role as head of backhouse security for the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas. While working security following a Chris Brown concert, without justifiable provocation, Brown and his paid entourage began to brutally and severely beat 4 fans who were attending a VIP event meet and greet. Specifically, plaintiff, who did not know who Brown even was, saw Brown throw the first punch. And while plaintiff attempted to intervene to stop the violence, plaintiff was instead thrown out of the way, while at the same time, Brown yelled racial slurs. I think that was the N-word. It's not a racial slur when it's to your own, but still, demanding that his entourage join in and beat the 4 fans. Well, arguably it may not be a racial slur. Here's the thing. Interestingly, in the prior discussion of the facts, they referenced the fact that Chris Brown's security instructed and jumped in on the beating. So I'm curious to know the difference between how many security guards were provided by the venue versus that Chris Brown was supposed to provide. And are they describing Chris Brown's entourage as his security, or is that distinct? Because it's a difference. All right, plaintiff instead was thrown out of the way, while at the same time Brown yelled, okay, we got that part. Okay, here we go. One of the fans that was beaten is Larry Parker. While he was trying to escape, somehow he made it into a stairwell and was cornered by a group. Falling to the floor into a fetal position, Brown and others chased Parker down, surrounded him, and began to kick and stomp him. Plaintiff, attempting to do all he could to prevent the violence, got himself in between the victim and Parker and most of the attackers. Unfortunately, the attackers, to include Brown, did not stop the violence. They instead continued to kick, stomp victim Parker, and in the process, repeatedly kicked plaintiff as well, severely injuring him. Notably, one of Brown's crews launched his 300-plus body on top of Parker, and the plaintiff before finally being drugged off. Did he? I don't know. Maybe he launched himself on top of them to like try and help him. I don't know. But that sounds painful. Here we go. And then finally, it says plaintiff, as a former correctional officer, describes the event as a prison yard beatdown. Ultimately, plaintiff narrowly escaped and helped Parker escape through a locked door. When asked later who instigated the assault and how it started, plaintiff pointed out Brown. In response to plaintiff's identification, plaintiff was told, "That's the artist." Plaintiff's actions likely prevented further injury or even death to those who were the targets of Brown's ire. Plaintiff is a hero. Unfortunately, plaintiff has been taken off of work by his doctor due to his injuries, which include not only a severely injured hip, but also a diagnosed cracked vertebrae in his neck. I want to know, did he go directly from there to the hospital? Did he go home? What happened? Because it's always interesting when you see someone talk about how severe their injuries are, but they don't go directly to the hospital. We'll see. The plaintiff herein is just the latest in a long line of individuals who have suffered at his hands, which is the latest incident. Okay, it's going more into the facts. All right, so here's the tricky part here. Remember, in the lawsuit, let me make sure that I go to the different part. Yeah, in this lawsuit, notice they're suing Chris Brown, Live Nation, etc., claiming failure to secure, like a negligent security. But then at the same time, he is security. So which one is it? Are you saying they didn't do enough job? But two things can be true in that this plaintiff, did a good job securing to the best of his ability, but that there should have been more people like him around too. It's just going to be tricky. It would be tricky to prove both, or it could be because it's not very clear who this plaintiff worked for. So, for example, he may have worked for an independent contractor hired by Live Nation to provide security, in which case the question becomes, did that independent contractor, did they hire enough people, et cetera, et cetera? But the gist of this petition here is that it looks like this one is going to be a issue for Chris Brown. And because it happened in Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, they already don't like Black people. Okay. Tarrant County don't like us. That is where it wasn't Breonna Taylor, but Atiana Jefferson. One of those was, pow in her own home. I'll get the name correct for the next time that I cover this case. But that was in Tarrant County. Therefore, I believe that I would not be surprised if all of these gentlemen have criminal charges pressed against them shortly. Some people have asked, well, has a police report been made? Here's how police reports work. They don't become available to the public until charges become pressed. Now, they're always available. You get an incident number, and that's always available to the victim, to the person that called in to make the report. But it is not publicly available to bloggers, myself, or the media until charges become pressed. And then that's when you may see bloggers and others pull those records and cover it. But right now, it looks like even if there was prior beef, even if those things happen, you still don't get to beat people down. You don't get to jump people, even if it was like 4-on-4. At the point where it appears the first lick was thrown, there didn't seem to be any form of a threat. But there's still a lot of questions that remain. So it'll be interesting to see how Chris Brown's PR team couches it. How do they describe it on their end? And there's so much more that we need. So hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Tonight, y'all, please come back. I will be doing a live that's going to be covering Jennifer Williams and her fiance, Boo, and whether or not he is scamming her. On a recent episode of Basketball Wives, he's explaining to Jen how, he needs her help. Because of a prior incident where he served some time, which he was forthcoming about, that he's got about $250,000 worth of restitution. Well, we've got a background check on him, both a background check and the real deal on his record and whether he really needs that $250 to pay that restitution or maybe for something else. So stay tuned, guys. Thanks for tuning in.